All right, the next biomolecule that we talk about are fats and lipids. So if we take a look at this first screen I have up here, lipids are, why is that on there? Lipids are nonpolar molecules that are not soluble in water. So what does that mean? An example of a lipid would be oils. And if you mix water and oil, you know that they never mix together. You can shake it up as much as you want, like in terms of, like, say, salad dressing. Okay, if you make a homemade salad dressing, it's going to have, let's say, olive oil and water in there. You shake it up, and if you let it sit on the counter for too long, a couple minutes, it's going to go back and separate. So lipids are nonpolar, where we know water is polar. So if one's nonpolar and one is polar, they're not going to be soluble or dissolve into one another. Here we take a look at ducks, and so we often wonder, like, well, how can they just swim in this cold weather? Right now our lakes and streams and everything are getting down into the cold temperatures with the cold nights. How are those ducks able to be out there in the early spring and the late fall? And the reason is that they have a type of wax covering their feathers. So when the water hits them, it just basically beads up on top of there and keeps them from getting that cold water into their body. And it's almost like a repellent, if you were to spray something on your boots to repel water. Okay, that's what these waxy fats are on the duck feathers. They repel that water and keep it away from them. Okay, so let's take a look at that data table. I'm going to blow that back up. Ooh, we don't want carbs anymore. We want lipids. Okay, let me right here. So, function of a phospholipid. A phospholipid is our first type. Okay, kind of a big word. But because it has this in it, we know it's a lipid. So the function of this one is you find it in the cell membrane. Okay, so all cells, anywhere in your body, they all have this cell membrane surrounding the cell and keeping all the insides inside. So it's like the barrier. Basically, you could kind of think of it like the skin to the cell. And this skin cell membrane layer is made up of lots of phospholipids, okay? And they're all back to back to back. Oops, detailed function, I'm not sure what I want there. Okay, so if you take a look and you were to take a really close look at a cell membrane, okay, it's going to look like this. All right, this would be a cross section. You've got a tail and that lipid head on the cell membrane. Okay, and so this makes up your cell membrane, and this is just a barrier to cells. We also call cell membranes the gatekeepers. Okay, so they're going to help regulate what can get inside of that cell and what has to stay outside. If you're not a phospholipid, you are fats. Okay, so you could have multiple types here. I'm going to go back here and try to move this stuff around. I'm going to blow up here. Okay, so we have different types. If we start looking at fat in terms of energy, okay, it's like the backup plan. It can protect you or can be thought of as like an insulator. So let's go back to this and blow this back up. Okay, so this data table is a little bit bad, but you may have it there for energy. Now I know we said carbs were there for energy, and I'll explain this one in a second. It might be there for protection, and that's meaning like protect all of your inside organs so that they don't jam together. And then it might be used for insulation. Okay, so energy, when we store fat, so if you've got stored fat, This is like the reserve tank. Okay, so when your body reserve tank, when your body runs out of carbohydrates, your blood glucose that goes into those cells to make energy for your body, when we run out of those sugars or glucose, then it's going to start dipping into your fat store. And the body can burn fat for energy. It's the whole idea of like that ketosis and the keto diet that's out there. So if you're not eating carbs and sugars, basically then your body has to go to that reserve tank and it will start burning some of that fat for energy. Protection, okay, now we protect organs. Okay, your heart, your ribs, everything that has a little bit of fat in it, even under the skin. Okay, so the organs or the insides. That's going to offer protection. Insulation, you could think of like a big seal with its blubber on it. Okay. The more fat you have, the warmer it's going to keep you. So, you know, if you have a body with lots and lots of that adipose tissue underneath your skin, oftentimes you may not need to wear a winter jacket, or you can stay out in colder temperatures longer because you've got that layer of insulation. And we see this like blubber on seals. They're in the ice cold waters of the ocean, and yet they just swim around because they're insulated with all of those thick layers of blubber. I'm going to minimize this down. All right, so let's take a look at this picture. Right here, type of lipid. This one would be what? I would say protection, because it's using fat for energy energy, because it's using the fat for energy during a long run. I'm gonna go open my door real quick. Eighth hour's coming in. Okay, so I'm sorry. So in terms of this one, there's actually probably a couple things going on. We could have protection. Okay, so when she's jogging down the road, it's probably, you know, the fat inside of her body is protecting her organs. You don't want your spleen running into your ribs and all of that. So there's a little bit inside of there. Also, once she burns through all of her glucose, that's going to start using the fat for energy. Okay, over here, what do we see? Here's that phospholipid bilayer. Okay, so this is a phospholipid. Cell membranes contain two layers. So here's your first layer up on the outside, and then there's just kind of tail to tail. And so that's why they call it a phospholipid bilayer, because there's two of them. But it keeps, if this is the inside of the cell down here, this is providing that barrier to the outside world of the cell and then regulating what comes in and out. Well, these were some seals. I'm not quite sure where they were, but this type of lipid would be fat, and it would be providing insulation. And let's see here. Fat around the heart, protection. Obviously, oh, there's the seal's head. Nice. Okay, this should be a heart, which I'm not quite sure why we can't see it, but if you see this, it looks just like that, like if you cut apart chicken, okay? That's that fat tissue inside of you. And there is some fat around the heart, and in a good way, it will offer protection to that heart. If it bumps into other things, you don't want too much though, because then it becomes an issue of, you know, all of that plaque, and it has a hard time beating because there's too much fat around it. So that one's kind of like a borderline one. We want enough to protect, but we don't want it to harm our health either. So, okay, so you should have fats and lipids filled in for that second data table right now.